Good morning. It is so good to be here with you. The other day, I was picking up a friend who lives over in the collection, the homes behind the collection. And if you know those streets, you know, they're one way. And I always didn't go the wrong way. That's what you first thought, right? Just like, yeah, no, that's not what happened. So as I was I was going to pick up a friend of mine. I pulled in, and there was this tow truck in the middle of the road. And there's cars parked on both sides. And so he's basically blocking the entire road. And I can't back up because I'm all the way, like part way down this one way. And so this car pulls up behind me. Well, the tow truck driver, he comes out and he goes, "Oh my gosh, what am I gonna do?" You know, he's looking around, he's this super joyful guy, and he's like, "I'm so sorry." And he comes over to the window and he says, "I've got to give this guy a jump start and then I'll get out of your way." And I'm like, "Oh yeah, no problem. You know, I'm a patient guy." So, why are you laughing? Wow. All right, I'm done. Jeez. So anyway, so I'm sitting behind and I'm listening to music, just getting ready to pick up a friend, and I can see the lady behind me. And so first it's like this, she's just sitting there, and then she's like this, you know, you could see her head, she rolls down the window, she's looking out, she's like, "What's going on?" And I'm like, "Oh, hold on." And I can see the guy working on the car, but she can't. And so, and I mean, this is just progressing very badly right now, because she's getting so mad and so impatient. And so she's sitting there and a couple minutes go by and she's just like looking back, am I gonna back up? And she's scooting her car forward, trying to get her, but there's nowhere to go. You have to wait. There's nothing you can do. And then the guy comes out again, he's like, "Oh, hold on, please be patient." And then she just says, "I'm done." And she just starts laying on the horn. And he's like, what am I? And she just keeps going and going. And he finally goes over to her window, explains to her. She's like, said a few choice words and told him he's number one. And you'll get that later. Anyway, so it was this sad situation. She was so angry. And even after he went back, he finished the car, she was just livid. She was so mad, and I felt so bad. I mean, inside, I was like, "Please hurry up." You know, I was getting a little angry, and because I'm a pastor, I probably would have honked too, but, you know, I have to be kind of nice on the outside. But inside, I was kind of like, okay, this is taking longer than I anticipated, you know, and so this lady, I was actually living vicariously through her. I'm like, yeah, she's terrible, but me, I'm good. So the reason why I'm sharing that story is this. Have you ever been somewhere when somebody didn't get their way? And maybe that's like at the airport, and you know, you're late for your plane and you show up late and you're in line waiting, and all of a sudden you see that person just lose it. Like, "I'm gonna miss my plane," and they explode or they go crazy. Or maybe you're at a restaurant and somebody didn't get the food that they wanted, or they made it wrong, and you're like, "Send this back." And there's this explosion that happens. Or maybe there's plans that were anticipated and never went through, and all of a sudden you're this frustration. Maybe you've experienced someone who's like that, or maybe you are that person. Man, we're living in such this is what I call it an angsty, right? I don't even know if that's a word. An angsty and angry world right now. Like, people are on edge. And how they respond to each other and how we relate to each other, right, really is going to either make our society or destroy our society and how we live. And what's crazy is I believe the scriptures are really clear on how we respond to one another and how we live in a world that's angry and angsty. Or even if we are angry and angsty people ourselves, how do we live that out? How do we heal that? How do we cure that? How do we live in a place where we're not that way? And so this morning I want to unpack kind of how Jesus, right, what his solution is to this and what this may be for us. So if you have your Bibles, and I hope you do, open them up to Matthew chapter 26, and we're going to look at verse 47. We're going to start there. And so this is right before Jesus is crucified. And listen to what happens here. And what we're going to do is we're going to read through this. I'm going to unpack a few things and look at it maybe from a different viewpoint than we're used to looking at it. But listen to what it says. It says this. It says, while he was still speaking, talking about Jesus, I was looking at Judas, so I said Judas, which is just terrible. It was, this is not my morning. Lindsay, can you finish this for me? While he was still speaking, Judas, one of the 12, arrived. Now listen to what it says. It says, with him was a large crowd armed with swords and clubs, sent from the chief priests and the elders of the people. Now the betrayer had arranged a signal with them. The one I kiss is the man. Arrest him. Going at once to Jesus, Judas said, greetings, Rabbi, and kissed him. So you have this picture, right? Jesus is there. He's with the disciples. And Judas is about to betray him. Now, if you're there, you're with Jesus, and you're his disciples, and you feel that, hey, man, we're with this guy Jesus, we're going to take over the world, because that's where they were at this point. They felt like, man, they were going to create a whole new government, they were going to create a whole new kingdom on earth, and it was going to be amazing, and they were going to be in charge, and Jesus is their leader. And then Judas, one of their own, comes and is going to betray him. And not only does he show up alone, but listen to what it says here. He shows up with a large crowd armed with swords and clubs. Like, that's significant. So it's not just Judas showing up. All of a sudden, there's this army of people with him. And so here you have your little group of huddled disciples and Jesus, and then Judas with this army of just power that comes towards him. Verse 50, it goes on, it says, Jesus replied, he says, do what you came for, friend. Then the men stepped forward, seized Jesus, and arrested him. And with that, one of Jesus' companions reached for his sword, drew it out, and struck the servant of the high priest, cutting off his ear. I love that scene. And we know that's Peter. And Peter was a zealot, and Peter was powerful, and Peter was passionate. And so he pulls out his sword, and he's like, not my Jesus. And he's, and he goes to the the servant of the high priest and chops his ear off. Now, just some observations. Like, if you're Peter, like just think about being him in this situation. I mean, you're scared. There's a group of people with clubs and swords. You're thinking, man, okay, these guys are after us. We're supposed to be the ones taking over the world, and yet these people are going to stop us from doing that, right? Not only that, your leader's being betrayed. So here's Judas, one that has been, and now he's betraying Jesus, and you're like, man, and there's this anger that comes up. There's this protection that comes up, right? It's not supposed to go this way. This isn't how it was supposed to happen, right? Jesus, this isn't what we planned. This is so far from what we expected. So he's scared. He doesn't know what's going on, and he grabs his sword, and he just begins hacking. Chops the guy's ear off. Now, again, observation-wise, Peter probably knew his sword well if he was a zealot. And so with his sword, right, someone with a weapon seems powerful. Like if he didn't have a sword and he was like, I'm going to get you, it's just not his power. But he pulls out his sword and chops it out, right? There's power in that weapon. There's power in the sword. And I'm going to fight you. And so Peter seems powerful. The sword seems powerful. It's a weapon. I know how to use this, and I'm going to take care of this, and I'm going to... See, weapons are easy to pull out when we want to protect something. Weapons are easy to pull out when we're scared and we don't know what to do. Weapons are easy to pull out when we're frustrated and we're angry, when we don't get our way, when things just aren't working like we think they should work. Weapons, we pull them out when we want to get the upper hand, when we want to push someone down and go above them. Weapons are great when we feel threatened or something comes against us or we feel weak and inadequate, right? We pull out our weapons. So when I talk about weapons, sometimes we use swords as weapons. Sometimes we use words as weapons. Sometimes we use actions, we do things or do something as a weapon in response to something like laying on the horn. That's a weapon. When we lash out, that's the weapon that we use. Now check out what Jesus says. Look at Matthew 26, 52 through 53. He says, Peter, well, he didn't say it, but he said, Peter, put your sword back in its place, Jesus said to him. For all who draw the sword will die by the sword. Do you think, I love this, I cannot call on my Father and he will at once put at my disposal more than 12 legions of angels? So this isn't a question of power, right? This is right, because who has the most power? This is a question of weapons. There's so much more going on here. And Jesus is like, hey, put your sword back in your place, Peter, because that's not how this works. I'm going to show you a different way to live. And not only that, in Luke 22, we know that the ear that got chopped off, Jesus actually takes it and puts it back on the guy who got chopped off and healed him, right? And so really what Jesus is saying is that what I taught you? To just, when you don't understand something, when you're frustrated at something, to pick up a weapon and just start swinging. And when you don't know what's going on and when you're scared or it doesn't go your way, you just start swinging your weapon. Because you guys, so many times I swing my weapon. And again, it may not be a sword, but it may be my words, it may be my actions, and it may be in response to something I don't understand. So what does Jesus tell us to do? See, I think we use weapons because they make us feel powerful, right? You always say that, like, you know, my son's in the military. I was like, yeah, the guy with the biggest gun is I'm like, no, you're so lame. Like, because he's all in this military mind, like big, powerful weapons. You know, if we have bigger guns, then we're going to be the most powerful. And that's the thought. But see, Jesus doesn't use any weapons. And he has every weapon at his disposal. He doesn't use any weapons. What does he do? He surrenders. He doesn't fight back. Listen, in a scene a little bit later, he's put on trial before Pilate. And this is right after Jesus was beaten. They put the crown of thorns on his head. And so they bring Jesus to Pilate. And the Jewish rulers are like, we want this guy dead. And Pilate's like, well, why should I put him to death? And they're like, because he claims to be the Messiah. And he's like, well, I don't really care. And so he's confused, but he supports the whole Roman government, or he's the guy. And he's like, well, I don't want to upset the Jewish leaders, but I don't understand this Jesus. And listen to what Pilate says in John 19, verses 10 through 11. He says this. He looks at Jesus because he's asking him a few questions, and Jesus is refusing to answer. And he says, do you refuse to speak to me, Pilate said. Don't you realize I have power either to free you or crucify you? Now think about that for a minute, what Pilate is saying. Like he's pulling out his weapons, right? He's like, don't you even know I have this authority? I can crucify you. I have the power to put you to death, but I also have the power to free you. I have authority over you. Do you know who I am? Maybe you've experienced this. Maybe someone has used words like this against you, and it would be something like this. Don't you know I hold your job in my hands? I have the power to fire you. Don't you know I have the power to give you good grades? You better do as I say. Oh, I know the secret. I know everything about you. You better listen to me. I sign your paycheck. I make the rules around here. I know people that know you. I can make your life miserable if I want, right? There's this, that's pulling out a weapon. See, in our world, power usually comes from weapons, authority, and position. That's how we view it. And Jesus surrenders. Listen to what he says, verse 11. Jesus answered and says, you would have no power over me if it were not given to you from above. Therefore, the one who handed me over to you is guilty of a greater sin. Really, what little you have, I allowed it anyway. You don't have any power over me. Now, do you see how crazy this is? Because this whole story, Peter tries to appear powerful with his sword, right? He tries to appear powerful with his sword. The crowd coming for Jesus, they appear powerful with their clubs and swords and pure numbers. Here they are after him. They're an army. Like you can't fight against that. Pilate appears powerful. Pilate, he lays down the law basically saying, well, it's up to me whether you live or die. I have the power. And they all appear powerful. And how does Jesus appear to us? helpless and powerless. See, in the world according to Jesus, power looks much different than we see it. Judas, the crowd, the clubs, Peter's sword, the number of people coming, right? All those things, they are actually very weak. That's not true power according to Jesus. Jesus, who appears weakest, is actually the most powerful. So in Matthew 5:38, this was way before when Jesus did the Sermon on the Mount. Listen to what he said. He said, "You have heard that it was said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But I tell you, do not resist an evil person. If anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to them the other cheek also. And if anyone wants to sue you and take your shirt, hand over your coat as well. And if anyone forces you to go 1 mile, go with them 2 miles." You get the picture what Jesus is getting to. So basically he's saying, hey guys, you have misinterpreted this verse. You have missed what this verse means. And let me explain what it means, right? That's really what he's saying is this is what it means. It says, do not resist an evil person. So when someone does something to you, right, in our world, we do something back to them. Every single movie that we watch, right, it's a revenge story somewhere. That someone's going to do something so awful and they set up this terror and then they're like, and then all of a sudden revenge happens. We're like, yes, that's the best. If you ever watched a movie where no revenge happens, you're like, that's a dumb movie. I don't even want to watch that movie. Like, and the person is forgiven in the end and there's this great relationship. It wouldn't work. Nobody would go see that because there's this like we want to see revenge. They should get theirs. Revenge feels good. When someone rips on you in a crowd, you rip back on them. If someone goes behind your back, we naturally want to go behind theirs. When someone does a power move against you, you do a power move against them. When someone shows off they're better than you show off that you're better than them. So Jesus is saying, you have heard it said to keep honking, keep yelling, keep grudging, keep gossiping, keep striking back, keep hurting, keep fighting back, keep standing for what you believe in and keep fighting at all costs. You heard it said to pull out your sword and just start swinging. But that's not what I've told you to do. I tell you to resist an evil person. Man, I don't like that. I don't want to resist an evil person. I want to fight an evil person. And yet Jesus does this juxtapose of like, hey, all these power things, power trips are coming on me. And instead of fighting it with more power, I'm surrendering to it. Do you see how just so crazy that is? So what does this mean? And I'm trying to put this just in a phrase, and I like this phrase, is whatever you do, don't become the destruction that is being done to you. That's what Jesus is getting at, right? Whatever you do, don't become the destruction that is being done to you. So when, on the freeway you're driving and someone cuts you off or they, and you're like, I'm going to cut you off. And then all of a sudden road rage and it just ends terrible. It's sad that that's an illustration in our world, but that is a typical thing that happens all the time. Where that rage comes out. And so if somebody comes swinging at you, cutting you apart with their words, their deeds, whatever it is, their power, their authority, resist the urge to come back at them with that same destruction. Resist the urge to respond like that. Resist the urge to pull out your weapon and fight. There's a great movie, I think it was in the 90s, it was called The War, if you've ever seen this movie, and it's a movie about a treehouse, and there's this war between these two families about this treehouse, and one of the families is Kevin Costner and his son, who was Elijah Wood, who was just a tiny little kid back then, and he just got back from Vietnam, Kevin Costner, and so he's this broken Vietnam vet, and then there's this other family, they're called the Lipnickies. So picture what the Lipnickies would look like, and that's exactly what they look like. So they were just tattered. I mean, they didn't have tattered clothes, didn't take a shower. And so the movie is about this war between the two. And so there's this scene that I love, my favorite scene in the whole movie. And they're at this country fair. And so Stu and his dad just get there, and his dad goes to buy some cotton candy and leaves Stu. And so Stu starts walking around, checking out the country fair, and there's all these people. But all of a sudden, the Lipnicki kids are there. And they show up, and they start harassing Stu. They surround him. They start pushing him around. Then they attack him, say all kinds of mean things. They start beating him up. He's got a bloody lip and a bloody nose. And finally, his dad is looking for him and finds him and picks him up and breaks up the fight. The next scene, Kevin Costner and his son are just about to leave. They're just about to get in their car because they have this cotton candy that they're going to take home to his sister and his mom. And two of the Lipnicki kids are standing there and just begin to heckle them, making fun of them, laughing at them. And as they're about to get in the car, Kevin Costner shuts the door and he walks over, and the kids get freaked out. They start backing up. And he walks over to him and he leans over and he hands one of the kids cotton candy and the other kid cotton candy. And then he gets back out and he walks back to the car. And Stu is livid. He's like, Dad, like what? Why would you give them cotton candy that is for mom and for our sister? Like, they just beat me up. And he's just angry. And I love exactly what Kevin Costner says, because they look like they needed it more than we do. So when I picture this verse, that's what I picture. Right? That's what I picture is this, did they have every right to really fight back? Yeah. But you know what they did? You know what he did in that? He surrendered. In fact, it cost him something. And really, that's a picture, just a small picture of how Jesus is, and a small picture of what he desires of us. Because really, if we don't resist, we become exactly what we're fighting. Right? If we don't resist what's happening to us, then we become exactly what we're fighting. And if you've been wrong, don't try to make it right in your own eyes. Don't try to make it right. Resist the urge to become destructive. Now, I need to be clear. This does not mean if you are being abused physically, emotionally, spiritually, sexually, that you remove yourself from that you get out of that and get help as soon as possible. This isn't just saying I'm going to do everything I can. No, that is not what this is saying. That if you're being abused, if you're being hurt, if you're being any of those things I've talked about, man, you need to remove yourself from that situation immediately. But what it does mean is this, is that because you were abused, you know what it's like to be abused, and so you don't abuse others. Because usually people that abuse have been abused. That's why they abuse. Does that make sense? People that are hurt others, and that's why they hurt. And so because you've been hurt, you know what it's like to be hurt. And so you surrender your weapons. You surrender the fight, right? And you refuse to go against others when they hurt you. Yes, you remove yourself from the situations. What? Hurt people hurt people. Hurt people hurt people. Hurt people use their power over people. Hurt people lash out. Hurt people say stupid stuff. Hurt people use whatever weapon they have. And here's the thing, we've all been hurt. Everyone in this room has been hurt in one way or another. It doesn't matter if it's terrible abuse or just something simple. The level doesn't matter. The point is we've all been hurt, and so it's easy for us to hurt back when we've been hurt. It's easy for us to do that. So Jesus says, you have heard it said, come out swinging, get revenge, pull out your weapons, honk your horn, get what you're owed, scream at that person, show who's boss, don't let them take advantage of you. But I say to you, surrender your power. Surrender your power. Let it go, because real power exists in surrender. Real power exists in surrender. So let me be clear as I close this up here. I'm not saying, please understand this, that we don't stand up for what's right and just. In fact, Scripture is very clear as followers of Christ. Part of our mission is to stand up for those that are hurt and broken, to when we see injustice happening. Remember, injustice just means when there's this unevenness happening, that when we see somebody treated differently, that we come in and we say, hey, this isn't right, we need to do something about it. That's not what this is about. That is our responsibility, to stand up for what's right and just. And it's not saying we don't protect those that we love, or our families, or those who need our help. It just doesn't mean to sit down and just say, okay, I'm just going to lay here like a lost puppy. That's not what that means. But what I am saying is this, is that you and I are not to use our power, which is our authority, our position, or our weapons, which is our words or deeds, to hurt, manipulate, deceive, and make other people do what we want them to do. Jesus says, put that sword away. Put that sword away. Don't brandish that weapon. So when someone lashes out at me or comes at me or hurts me, I resist the urge to do back to them what they did to me. I resist the urge to hurt them. I remember that they, like me, are human and they are hurting. And I'm hurting. And they're just lashing out because they've been hurt. Please understand, it's not enabling others when they're wrong. It's responding in a way, please catch this, that stops the vicious cycle by refusing to utilize weapons and power. You're ending the cycle. You're stopping it right there. Because what happens if that cycle continues? What happens in our world if we just keep honking, screaming, yelling at each other, disagreeing, fighting, and not loving? What happens if, we have all the wisdom in the world and we're so smart that we can outsmart everyone? All we're going to do is fight, fight, fight. And Jesus says, no, you know what? Just surrender, because there's so much more going on. So I am willfully surrendering to my need to control the situation when I do this. I am willfully surrendering my need to control the situation. I'm surrendering my need to control the outcome of a situation. I'm surrendering to the will of God and the guidance of His will in my life. That is not easy. I'm not saying it's easy. It's the hardest thing to do, but that's what He calls. So I surrender my weapons. And it's realizing that God is all powerful and I am not. That's why weakness works, because it empties us out. And only God can fill us. 2,000 years ago, Jesus died on the cross in the ultimate act of weakness. And the ultimate act of weakness, right? The surrendering of God on the cross brought the ultimate power in all history and mankind. Remember that next time you want to honk. Remember that next time you want to fight back and stand up for your rights or whatever you want to do that you feel you need to come out swinging. And remember what Jesus did on that cross. Because that's what matters most, is that surrender to be like Him. Can I pray? Jesus, would you help us lay down our weapons, whatever they are? And all of us have different ones. Maybe some of us, it's our words. Some of us, it's our actions. Whatever it is that makes us feel powerful in gaining the upper hand on someone, putting down someone, not getting what we want. Let us surrender that. Let us be in this world so different that when people see us respond, they go, that person is like Jesus. Help us live out these things. Help us be like you, God, so that we can surrender when we have to, but also where we can stand up when we need to. Pray this in your name. Amen.